Brilliant. Okay, fabulous. Thanks a lot for coming along to join me this afternoon, just before half term. I hope you're all feeling, I'm sure you very much deserve a break. This is one of the most difficult half terms I think there is. And, you know, thankfully it's there. I mean, I don't get half terms anymore. Some advantages to not working in schools, but there are some disadvantages as well. I certainly, you know, can understand you really wanting a break. This session is on achieving the 4th Gatsby benchmark, and I view this as being a really, really important and a really, really key area to get right in a school, but a very difficult one to get right. But once it's done and embedded, I think a lot of positive things can flow from it. And when I was talking to the LEP about running these sessions, this was another benchmark that they saw as being really, really key and really, really important to give some focus to. They saw the schools that they're working with not necessarily achieving as high as they could across this benchmark, and they see it as one as being very, very crucial to good careers in school, and I absolutely agree. It's probably the area in terms of historically in careers that has been the most neglected, and actually, although it's not new, this concept of careers across the curriculum, it was probably the benchmark that as careers professionals and careers educators we were most happy to see being prioritised, and it really is very crucial. So today's session, by the end of this session, hopefully you will be able to understand the significance and the scope of the 4th Gatsby benchmark. So I'm not going to spend too much time dwelling on this, but it is a hugely significant benchmark and it has enormous scope and potential power. I'm hoping you're going to be able to share and be aware of some of the challenges of implementing this benchmark. Maybe the fact that you're all here this afternoon is an indication that you are struggling, or you can see at least the struggles that sometimes come about with achieving this benchmark. But I want to be sharing some of those, because it's only in terms of sharing those challenges that we can really start to come up with some solutions. But the vast majority, perhaps 2/3 of the session really, is for you to be given some strategies to meet the benchmark and engage the whole school with the careers agenda. So really some stuff that I've seen work across different schools that I've worked with, and very much importantly, you know, really identifying how it can be done effectively at, I don't really like these terms, but at a strategic level and an operational level, I guess, in terms of how it needs to be managed in order for Gatsby benchmark 4 to be achieved, and then also how it needs to be implemented actually within school. And I think it's worth saying here, although I've talked about the 4th Gatsby benchmark, and we're going to look at Compass in just a moment and what it says about achieving it, it's not just about hitting that benchmark, it's about careers being spoken about well across the school or college that you're working with. And I don't think Compass necessarily, as it can be said in many areas, necessarily assesses it in the best possible way. So what I'd like you to do now, if you feel happy, is to pop in the chat what you feel are the purposes, or one of the purposes, of education. Now, this may seem like a really basic idea, but I think when it gets to Gatsby 4, we're actually going back to the bedrock of why do we have careers in schools? Why is it important? Because to some extent, a large part of it is winning of hearts and minds of staff and actually explaining to them and helping them understand why careers is crucial. But I'd like you to think of what are the wider reasons that we have education. Why do we go to school? Why do young people go to school? What is education's function? So if you could put in the chat what you think, just a word or two about what you think is the function of education, that would be really, really good. And then I'm going to go on to, give me away one there, to talk about some of the things that I think we would put in there. So anybody could put that in the chat, I would really appreciate it before I get started. It's a bit like people putting their hand up in class. Any thoughts? Yeah, I've got somebody keen to prepare students for life. Brilliant, Beth, that's great. Anybody else got a thought about what they think is the point of education? We all work in education. We've all spent at least probably 18 years of our lives in education. But why? Preparing students for life, John agrees. Brilliant. Well, I'll give you some of the ideas that I have put down here, and you won't be surprised to see that offer different opportunities. Brilliant, absolutely. So education has a wide range of functions. I know one I think is really important that a lot of learners don't always talk about is this joy of learning. You know, actually there is something to be said for reading a poem, for you know, doing well in a test, for you know, understanding. It gives learners individually, and this is the individual function, a real enthusiasm, hopefully, or largely for life, and for learning more things and taking learning throughout their life. I often ask students why they want to go to university, and they'll say, because I think a degree might be helpful, or I want to go out and get drunk. They rarely say anymore, which is a shame. I actually want to learn more. I actually want to learn more about geography, and I actually want to study history further. But joy of learning is a big, important one. Next, we've got social development, you know, a really, really key one here. You know, improving the levels of education in our society is being seen as being a really important element of social development, isn't it? If people are more knowledgeable, if people are able to think critically, put a debate together, understand things better, then that's only going to make a better society for us all to live in as citizens. And then cognitive development, you know, we wouldn't as individuals be able to take on new information, understand, analyse, if we weren't educated in the way that we are. Life skills, this is going to link to careers in a minute, but understanding how to sit, understanding how to take direction, understanding how to learn what are appropriate behaviours, understanding how to present to people, to communicate, to problem solve. These are really important life skills. The next is sort of social mobility, which again is a social function of education, you know, the importance of everybody being given an opportunity. And this is one of the big problems, I think, with education, and why successive governments do get very involved in it, is because it's seen as being a tool, which it rightly is, but perhaps as not as much responsibility can be put on it as it often is in terms of schools to improve social mobility. So spend a lot of money on a school in perhaps a socially deprived area, recruit some brilliant teachers. Programs like Teach First were very much involved in doing this, and you will achieve social mobility for those learners. But we know it's actually a very, very complex thing, social mobility, and opportunity for learners is really important, but school isn't just the only thing that can make that happen. It's certainly an important tool. And schools that tend to do very well in terms of careers and careers across the curriculum, it's often, in my experience, because social mobility is at the heart of what they want to achieve. And so it's a very, very good way of getting the whole school very enthusiastic about a careers agenda, because they see it as being their responsibility as much as possible to improve chances for those individuals. So teachers who work quite often in quite challenging schools see careers and social mobility as a key element of what they do. Then the last thing, which is possibly what you were suggesting in a way in the chat, is this economic imperative, which is preparing for the future workforce. And again, a reason why governments get involved in careers heavily is because it's seen as being crucial to preparing young people for the world of work. We need to have young people who are in the future going to fulfill the criteria that we need, that the economy needs. We need to have them IT literate. We need to have them as good communicators. And we hope, I suppose, or we understand that the national curriculum, which is set up, and the exams set up in the way that they are preparing young people for the world of work, that the maths that students are learning in Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4 is the kind of stuff that the labour market wants to see in 5 or 6 years' time, that the stuff that learners are being taught in Key Stage 3 and 4 and 5 in geography are preparing young people to be effective town planners or working in construction or environmental careers. We're hoping that the things that we're being taught, we're teaching students, are preparing them well for the world of work. But clearly this is not always the case. We don't have to go very far before we hear employers saying that actually learners aren't necessarily being adequately prepared for the world of work, that the curriculum doesn't necessarily give them exactly what they need. Or more importantly, or more frequently, they're saying things like, the curriculum maybe is preparing the young people, but they're not coming out of school work ready with those softer skills that they might hope to see in their young learners. So when we talk about Gatsby 4, we really are talking about, okay, well, why should we get engaged with this? Why should the school care so much about careers? Why is it not just a bolt-on like other departments? Why does it have to be embedded across the school? And I think to get to the bottom of that, you do need to get to the bottom of why education is there in the first place. So this is a little extract from the DfE guidance after the Gatsby report, and it's focusing here on that 4th Gatsby benchmark. And again, just like I did last time, as an English graduate, I'm always picking out the words and looking at the language that's being used. But I'll read the quote out in full and then we'll talk a little bit about some of this language. Subject teachers should, so again, you know, not must, but should, also support the school's approach to careers education and guidance. The curriculum offers excellent opportunities for developing the knowledge and skills that employers need, and subject teachers can be powerful role models to attract pupils towards their subject and the careers that flow from it. Schools should ask all teachers to support the career development of young people in their tutorial role and through their subject teaching. Schools should work towards weaving careers education and guidance into subjects across the curriculum. And it's a brilliant quote. It's very ambitious and it's very aspirational, but it really does get to the heart of, and I'm not always a fan of the DfE in terms of their guidance, but this is a really good statement. It's quite empowering. It's saying, you know, okay, schools and subject teachers can be really important role models, and they can have a real role in attracting pupils towards their subject and careers that flow from it. And this is really key, because if we see education as being representative to some degree of the roles that are out there in the workforce, then every single subject can lead to different careers. And obviously there's massive crossovers in terms of that. But we have a sort of a responsibility to highlight to learners where those links are, and then sort of give them the passion, I suppose, to pursue those and understand themselves by their understanding their subject strengths. And we talk here again about people in their tutorial role and through their subject teaching. And this is something I want to consider throughout this session, is that most subject teachers also have pastoral relationship with probably a different set of learners. So that when we talk about teaching staff, we're talking about them, yes, in terms of their pastoral role, but also in terms of their role as a subject teacher. And schools should work towards weaving careers education and guidance in subjects. I think this is really crucial and brings me on to the next point. Because what Gatsby 4 really does is it spreads the responsibility, spreads the key message that careers is important, that careers has an important place in school, and that ensures succession within the culture of the school. If careers is embedded across the curriculum really, really effectively, just like if other careers processes are done really effectively and careers is managed really effectively in the school, then it's not just all on one person. It's not just all on that careers coordinator, that careers advisor, that careers leader. It means that that one person could be lifted out of the school and good careers is still taking place. Subject teachers can sometimes change, can sometimes alter, but if the department is always making those careers links, then pupils are always getting a lot of careers information, careers learning and careers guidance. You know, it's the most effective way of ensuring the maximum amount of careers input if Gatsby 4 is done well. Simple as that. It's not about one centralized system. It's not about one guidance interview. It's about multiple different conversations. It's about multiple different interventions right from year 7 all the way up to year 13. So getting it right, Gatsby 4, is kind of priceless. It can be hugely impactful. So what I've done here, a little bit like I did in my last section, if I've printed out what you'll be asked in terms of compass, and I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but obviously it's looking at, move my little thing there, what proportion of students are having curriculum links to careers within these 4 areas, so English, Maths, Science, and then PSHE. Now within PSHE, within the new framework, there's an emphasis on future planning and the world of work, or you may even have CDI specific careers lessons within PSHE, for example, that link to the CDI. So I think PSHE is a little bit different here. I think when we talk about PSHE, we're talking about distinct careers content lessons. But when we talk about English, Maths and Science, we're talking about those core subjects and are they being linked to careers? Now, I think it's interesting that Compass has highlighted those 3 key areas. These are subjects that all learners will do right up to Key Stage 4, clearly. And so they are important, but I don't think they're necessarily any more important as other subjects that might be optional. And so, for example, as an assessor for the Quality and Careers Standard, if I went to a school where perhaps the English department was quite weak at making careers links, but every other department was doing an absolutely brilliant job of singing at careers, that wouldn't necessarily concern me too much. If we just look at a few examples of these, you know, if you think about English, a good way to draw careers across the curriculum in a subject like English is that English will naturally do lessons on, English language lessons will naturally focus on things like impartiality and on language, persuasive language and that kind of thing. Now that is crucially important for learners considering FE and HE options so that they can understand that within school and college, within university and college prospectuses, they're being sold to. So it might not think like a distinct careers link, but actually it's very, very important that learners do understand that when they're looking at careers information for themselves later on. Now, when we're talking about maths, we could be talking about, okay, what are the kind of skills that you need in order to work in some jobs, such as in retail, even in terms of their part-time jobs. And I think this is something that maths has historically done quite well. It's made learners understand that actually, you know what, you do need to know this, because actually in most jobs in your future, an element of maths is going to be needed, or just in your wider life in terms of getting a mortgage or in terms of what personal finance. And then science, I think science has historically, again, potentially done science quite well, particularly with the drive for students to gain entry into STEM careers. And I think that is something that typically is done quite well. And when I assess schools, it's often the science department that is leading the way in terms of making those careers links. And so I think that's often done well, but we're going to talk about that in more detail in a moment. So a little bit more audience participation from you, please. What do you feel are the main challenges of achieving the fourth Gatsby benchmark? Because that's what we're going to move on to talk about now. We've talked about the scope and the value of that fourth Gatsby benchmark and meeting it. But what do you feel are the main challenges of achieving it? I've got a sense from my work in schools about what challenges you're facing as careers coordinators and careers leaders. But I'd love you to give me an idea in the chat now of what you feel are your main challenges of achieving this benchmark. Any ideas at all? I have got a few from myself. You're all dealing with trying to get this achieved. You're all dealing with subject teachers. You're all dealing with trying to get 100% on your compass for this one. So please pop into your chat anything that you feel are the main challenges of achieving this benchmark. I think this is going to be a slow one. Okay, I'll let you put it in as we're going along. If you've got one, pop it in. But I'm just going to start and actually share with you some of the things that I've come up with. And when I was a careers leader in a school, this is some of the stuff that I struggled with. So key here were teaching pressures. So the main challenge of achieving the Gatsby benchmark is that to go to teachers and say they've got something else to put into their lessons goes down like a lead balloon. Understandably, teachers are under enormous amounts of pressure, and their ability to take on new things and weave new things into their curriculum is not popular. That's another key one. Curriculum is very full, absolutely, Beth. Curriculum is very full. Where do you add careers in? How do you make those careers links? Brilliant. Okay. The next point that I would put is that sense of responsibility. Now, whose responsibility is it? It's not my responsibility. I teach maths. Why should I be taught having to teach careers as well? That's the responsibility of the careers person. But clearly the issue that we've already established is there's likely to be one, if not a very, very small team of careers people within a school. Sometimes it's one person with a very small time allocation. Whether we compare that to, say, a school's maths department or a school's science department, the numbers are just enormous. The amount of contact that you actually have with students as that one careers person is also very small. The amount of contact that a tutor has with their tutor group is enormous. And the amount of time that maths teacher has with their maths group is enormous. So yes, teaching staff may not feel it's their responsibility, either in their teaching capacity or as tutors, as form tutors, but clearly their contact is so much greater. That responsibility has to be even watered down to a degree, and they have a fraction of responsibility for careers. 0.5% is still going to have more impact than you could have as an individual working in a school with 1,500 students. There's not enough curriculum links quite often. It's hard to make those curriculum links. It's hard to understand what those curriculum links are. A lack of confidence among staff. I think this is a really key one. I remember going to a school and being involved in mock interviews and having an interview to conduct for biology, or I think it actually might have been biomedical science, for a student who was having an interview. I asked the biology teacher to be involved, and she said, I have no idea how to do that. I wouldn't know what to ask. And again, I think as careers professionals, we're quite used to stepping out of our comfort zone and basically trying to be convincing and talk about stuff we don't know a lot about, faking it till we make it. And sometimes academic staff don't feel comfortable with that. Now, clearly she knew a lot more about what that student could potentially be asked in a biology or biomedical science interview than I would ever know. I was just going to go on Google and research it and try and sound plausible. But she had that lack of confidence. And I think there is a great lack of confidence, which I'm going to talk about a bit more later, for academic staff talking about careers. And then we've got that issue that we've talked about already, that educational purpose. Is that my responsibility? Is that what education is about? Well, the truth is, yes, it is. But if we go back to that statement earlier, there's a lot of shoulds in there. Schools should. The curriculum of flexible opportunity, and teachers should be asked to support the careers development of young people. The language around that is still, it's not potentially strong enough, and it is very much, teachers being asked to do this, and quite rightly sometimes turning around and saying, I haven't got the time, no. Right, so I've written some more challenges in terms of what the issues are, and some of the stuff that I've seen within school, and that's things like tutors not delivering planned careers lessons in tutor time. I've seen it just simply not being delivered. I've worked in school where I've asked if PSHE is being delivered effectively, and it hasn't been. It's been planned, it's been there, it's been resourced, but the tutors are simply not delivering it. Subject teachers are not using careers language. They don't feel confident using careers language. PSA tutors are not always understanding the value of careers within the curriculum. So, we're expecting everyone to talk about careers, but we're not necessarily, as a careers profession, doing a great job of selling to people why they should talk about careers and why it's important. Tutors are not informing learners of careers interviews. That sometimes happens. I don't know whether I've put this a little bit later, but I've worked in schools as a guidance practitioner where teachers have been angry at young people being released for careers interviews. Now, that's not necessarily careers across the curriculum, but again, it's devaluing the career system. It's suggesting to learners, when they grumble to learners, that they don't see the value in careers. Positive destination data is giving some schools complacency. So sometimes when we think about some of those, really high-performing schools in Lincolnshire, if we think about grammar schools, there's this sense that, okay, if a student's getting a positive destination, then does good careers really matter? All our students are going off to university, so does it really matter? Well, of course, yes, it does, because just students getting onto a university course, even one at a competitive university, doesn't necessarily mean it's the best or optimal choice for that young people, or that they've been equipped to be an effective career planner across their lifetime. I'm soon going to be assessing, which is going to be hysterical, Eton College, for the Quality and Career Standard Award. But to be, in all fairness to them, I'm sure their destination data is absolutely brilliant, but they do put a lot of emphasis still on giving good career support. Clearly, they have a great amount of money in order to be able to do that. Teachers sometimes, I've heard, and I've had this from personal experience, devaluing the careers experience by sharing their own potentially quite negative views about what careers was like for them in school, and sometimes sharing that with young people, but maybe not in the most appropriate way. Teachers who've qualified in the past 10 years may be more unfamiliar with career learning, because career learning was something that sort of 15 years ago was seen as being more important in schools, but it has been neglected more recently. Confusion over where responsibility lies, who is responsible for careers. Surely it's just that one person. Why should I have to worry about it? Teachers at capacity within their own roles, we've talked about that. Tutor time being used to catch up with academic or pastoral concerns. And careers is quite often put alongside. I've noticed a lot of careers leaders who I'm working with at the moment have got safeguarding or pastoral as one of their remit, part of their remit, and careers. And while I can see they pair together and work quite well, clearly things like safeguarding, pastoral issues, emotional issues are highly reactive. And I always think they're a bit like something that can fill a vacuum. So if they're put together, whether that's in tutor time or whether that's within an SLT leader's role, pastoral will always trump careers, and it will always fill that gap. And so, very often careers is just pushed out. There's a limited appetite for staff training, a limited amount of time you've got for CPD. And then there's a general misunderstanding and distrust of the purpose of careers guidance and information sometimes. And again, that can be based on the teacher's personal experience. And maybe an outdated concept among staff about what careers is. So why should I be bringing careers into my lessons? That's the responsibility perhaps of a careers advisor. And maybe a misunderstanding that careers advice really is around students choosing one career at a very young age, at 15, 16, and then planning a very strategic path to that one career. Whereas, as careers professionals, we're aware that careers guidance is very different to that now. And the modern emphasis on careers is about equipping young people for basically careers management throughout their whole life. And we understand that, but it's about communicating that. But just to say, this is not a new problem, and it is not confined to secondary schools. My experience in HE, I used to work at St Andrews University, was that engaging academic staff with caring about careers was sometimes an uphill struggle. And again, it was with academic staff at a traditional university like St Andrews, there was quite a lot of kind of anger and grumbling about it, which is, I'm not suggesting that you always have that with staff in a school, but I think a lot of that came through a slight misunderstanding of what was expected, a slight lack of confidence, which they kind of pushed out in bravado. I think it's important to remember, and again, I don't want this to sound negative towards teaching staff, but a lot of teaching staff have gone from school to university and then on to teaching. Some have had work experience, some haven't, but they've definitely, for example, mostly gone on to university at 18, not always, but often. So when I speak to learners about, and in sixth forms who get frustrated that they're not being given the full range of options about alternatives to university, for example, I do say to them, well, where did your teachers go? And they say, well, they went to university. Well, then that's perhaps where they're most confident talking to you about. UCAS feels, for example, like the safest, most sort of not easy, but plannable route. And so, you know, this is not a new problem. Academics and teaching staff sometimes struggle with confidence talking about careers because their experience isn't always huge. It's why when you go to an FE college and you've got vocational courses being run by, you know, ex-hairdressers and ex-plumbers, clearly the kind of the whole narrative is very, very, very different because you're being taught a vocational job by people who have experience of that work area. So where is your school where in your school is Gatsby benchmark being well achieved? Now, you can put things in chat, but I won't hold around for it. I'm going to sort of go on because I'm running out of time a little bit to talk to you a little bit more about how it can be well achieved, because this part of the session is now moving on to talking about, okay, how can you engage your school with the careers agenda? How can you be achieving that Gatsby benchmark for? We've talked about some of the potential that doing well in Gatsby 4 is going to give you. We've talked about some of the challenges you might face in achieving it. Well, now we're going to talk about, okay, how do you actually achieve it? So I've looked at these key areas and I'm going to go into them on the next few slides in a little bit more depth. So I would say these are the key areas that you need to be looking at in order to get Gatsby 4 off the ground or to push it out further into the whole school plan. And that is by ensuring that the careers leader has sufficient authority to influence change. To ensuring that careers leadership sets high expectations around careers responsibility of staff. To think about how careers development is forming part of the school's action plan and how it can be included in departmental action plans. It's thinking about how careers offer can be given a high profile within the school. It's things like encouraging a visual careers presence within the school. It's about making staff aware of quality assurance, such as Compass and the Quality and Careers Standard or any other self-assessments you might do. And then lastly, it's about having CPD in place to engage the hearts and minds of the wider staff at the school. And actually, partway through this presentation, I'm actually going to just break off for 5 minutes and actually give you a bit of a sample of the kind of stuff that you might want to deliver with this last point in terms of CPD to your staff at schools. Right. So this first point here is ensuring the careers leader has sufficient authority to influence change. So this is a real key one. You need to consider, if you haven't already done so, and if the careers leader role is up for review, does the individual in the role have sufficient respect? Now, obviously the CEC sort of advises that, you know, the careers is delivered or is led by somebody on SLT or who answers to SLT. But if this is somebody who isn't necessarily on SLT, who sits kind of slightly separate to everybody else, you know, not necessarily a department head, not necessarily a middle leader or a senior leader, they're a careers coordinator, they may not feel they have the confidence, quite rightly, to go to the head of history and say, you need to make sure there's more careers across your lessons. You need to be making explicit links to careers within your schemes of work. Clearly, that is just not going to happen in that dynamic. There needs to be sufficient authority in place in order to make demands or to encourage even and ask, if that's the language that the CEC are interested in, asking those departments to make careers links, who is making that request. If it's a lower level member of staff who hasn't got sufficient respect, it's probably not going to happen. If it is the line manager of that individual, of the departmental head, if it's an SLT member, if it's the head, then clearly it's much more likely to happen. And so it might not be that the careers is coordinated necessarily by the SLT, but is there vocal backing from that SLT? Are the governors involved? Is there enough authority behind that individual for them to say, this needs to happen, this should be happening, please make this happen? So the careers leadership needs to set high expectations around the careers responsibility of staff. So once that position is vocal enough, has enough authority attached to it, these are the kind of things that you could be doing. So thorough auditing of gaps in the provision. And I've known a school who have basically gone round and in effect named and shamed, not academic departments in this case, they were actually sort of naming and shaming tutors who just simply weren't delivering careers within their PSHE slots. They were using it to catch up on other work and it wasn't being delivered. Now, this is very much, we think about it as being a bit of a carrot and a stick method. This is not something clearly that a lower level careers coordinator could do or would feel comfortable doing. This is something that needs to be done at a higher level by the head of PSHE, by an SLT member on behalf of careers. But things that can work well around this are things like having the careers presence in heads of department meetings. My role as a careers leader, I was a departmental head. Careers had its own department, a department of one, but I was given that parity with heads of department, so I could go to heads of department meetings. Having a presence there once or twice a year in heads of department meetings to talk about careers, to put careers on the agenda is really important. That careers leadership can then be doing things like celebrating positive careers links within lessons. So within staff within staff bulletins, within anything, saying, look, we've come across some great examples of careers within these lessons, or this event the science department, the biology section of the science department put on was brilliant, celebrating it. And then things like supporting departments with increased budget to deliver careers content. So if, again, typically things like the science department want to take a group of students from physics out to the local RAF base to look at an engineering side to the military, for example, is there money being found in order to allow for that? It probably won't come out the careers budget, and nor should it necessarily, because the careers budget is probably tiny. It might not be able to come out of the departmental budget. What other budget could it come out with? And then lastly here we've got this point that I wanted to make, because last week we had our Complete Careers Conference, and Nicola Hall, who works within the CEC, was suggesting that really, in order to be successful at this fourth Gatsby benchmark and at embedding careers across the curriculum and embedding careers within school, it should be compared to perhaps how literacy was viewed sort of in the last 5 to 10 years and how safeguarding is currently viewed now. Now, I don't think it can be really compared to safeguarding, because the key there is safety. And we all know that we've got a responsibility to the safety of our learners. But what she's saying is that things like safeguarding or prevent, we've been very, very good at ensuring that staff feel that collective level of responsibility. And I suppose in order to be successful, we need something similar in terms of careers. We need staff to feel that there's an element of responsibility in what they do to preparing young people for their future. And I know this is very, very hard, but we're talking about not necessarily teachers going away and doing a lot of work. And I think this is really key to achieving Gatsby Benchmark 4. We're not asking teachers to do a lot more work, but we're talking about them making those explicit links and having those conversations. It's about a heightened awareness in their minds and then passing that on to learners. This here is a little audit which I've got about careers across the curriculum. So again, this is a school that I worked with who had just literally gone through every single department and audited what was going on in terms of those careers links. I can't show you too much detail on that, but again, it's the kind of things you can be doing. So when it comes to another effective way of managing careers across the curriculum, I think careers development forming part of the school action plan and included in departmental action plans can work very well. So again, schools that I work with who are most effective at careers, social mobility, developing young people for life, equipping them for life is a huge, huge part of the ethos, and it's communicated well to staff. Careers language is used consistently and inspiringly by senior leadership to other staff. Okay, so careers is seen as being high profile, crucial and important. It's just within the language of the school. And the school development plan directly relates into departmental action plans. So at one school I worked at, what happened was that one year it was decided that not so much careers, but certainly employer engagement, which obviously is a big part of careers, was seen as being an important part of the whole school agenda. So every department was asked to do at least 2 career speaker or employer speaker links within that year. So that was the easiest year for me in terms of that job as careers leader, because ultimately then every department 8 to 9 departments, what have you. And I think it was done even by subject area, for example, so like sociology and psychology did their own. We're doing 2 external speaker events. That could have been a remote speaker or an in-person speaker. It could have been attending a lecture at Lincoln University, but it was passed on that responsibility. So that department had 2 events to run that year. Now, some of those they would have run already. They may have to have done 1 or 2 additional ones. And it was given to the responsibility of perhaps junior staff in the department to arrange and organise. It was brilliant. And it just meant that it happened. And my job was really taken care of. And I just had to kind of audit that year. Suddenly, going from organising many sort of centralised talks myself, I then had 16 to 18 individual employer engagement sessions that were going on without me even lifting a finger. Careers being given a high profile within the school. I can't overemphasize this. I really think careers needs to be on people's lips, and that is something that can be done gradually. So if you are the careers coordinator or the careers leader, making sure that careers is being mentioned in bulletins, it's being mentioned in staff briefings, that there is a careers presence at parents' evening. It's important to understand it's not just about teaching staff either. It's about sports support staff, school counsellors, LSAs. And don't just make this about teachers. Learning support assistants can have a huge impact on young people, mentors, as mentors, and having them talk about careers is really good. Having increased career literacy among staff. A lot of this is about language, using language. So if career staff are talking about employability skills and your strengths and your weaknesses, if they're using terms like life journey or career journey, if they're talking about decisions or choice, they're talking about specific things that their learners can go on to do, such as apprenticeships, college, BTEC, university. They probably are having a lot of those kind of conversations without even realising it. And this is really important. When you come to actually talk to the departments about what is going on in the school, and it can be really frustrating because departments might say they do very little, actually they're probably doing a great deal. Sometimes it's just a case of educating them about what you mean in order for you to be able to kind of itemise it and audit it, and for them to be confident doing more of it. Involvement of pastoral staff in the guidance process, so making sure that staff are aware that they can refer students for guidance, that they perhaps know the careers advisor. And I'm going to put academic staff in here as well, because I think, if a geography teacher has got an A-level student and they think they may benefit from a guidance interview, then they should be making referrals as well. Often subject teachers know the students better than anybody, so them feeding in is really useful to the guidance process. And staff should be engaged with and showcasing alumni. And again, this is something that a lot of schools do. If you've got a student from your art department who is, now, gone to do jewellery design at university, or you've got a student who went to do maths and has gone to a high-ranking university and has now got a PhD, really showcasing and kind of making a fuss of those people, talking about them in lessons, having a display on them is really cool, inviting them back in. And it's also about staff appreciating and benefiting from guidance. And this is a bit of a controversial point I put here, but in my previous role, I did actually offer staff guidance at times in schools because they themselves perhaps were not entirely happy with their careers or where it was going. And this is a bit controversial. It was something I would do kind of in my spare time, which your careers advisor may very well not be willing to do. But it really helped in terms of staff really appreciating what careers was and what good careers kind of should look, hopefully good careers should look like, without bigging myself up there. Another little tactic which you can use is by encouraging a really visual careers presence within the school. I know this is something done very well at schools like Cherry Willingham, for example. And these examples here I've got actually of university iconography, but it's about having a little motif, a little emblem that means careers. So when students see that, they know careers. It's on the posters around school, it's on the careers notice board, it's on the careers office. It's there everywhere. And what some schools like Cherry do very effectively, and I think that's something that Aggie, if you know Aggie Doughty, brought in, is that she actually went through a lot of teachers' PowerPoints and then latterly encouraged, I think, them to do it themselves and put small icons just like this one at the bottom of different PowerPoints that had specifically good careers related information. So literally, if there is that lesson, for example, on English that I was talking about, when we're talking about partial language and subjective language, pop a little careers link on there, and it reminds the teacher to talk about it just briefly. Mention prospectuses, for example. If there's a geography lesson when we're talking about town planning, have that little icon on there so that the teacher remembers to talk a little bit about different career links and different careers that might be relevant in terms of that area of study. So I think that's one of the best sort of little tactics I've ever seen. It's not an easy one, and it might take you 3 or 4 years to embed that within the subject departments, but it's a great little starter. Creating a little icon in the first place is a great way for everyone to understand what careers looks like in the school. Give it a brand. And then when we're thinking now about any quality assurance processes that are going in place, so maybe tell your academic staff about Compass, what it is. A little once a year, stand up in staff briefing and say, just to let you know that Compass is something that is a self-assessment tool the school does every year or every term to look at how effective careers is doing within the school. And currently this is how we're doing. If you engage in things like the quality and career standard process, absolutely talk to the staff about what's involved. When I went through the process as a careers leader, people were really supportive of me. How's your inspection going? I know your inspection's coming up. Can I help? Make sure people are celebrating and supporting the careers within the school, and helping staff understand the questions that Ofsted might ask. And if you attended John's session a couple of weeks ago, you'll have an awareness of that get them thinking a little bit about the fact that, yeah, you are being offsetted as well. It's not just about the academic departments, it's about careers, and that means careers across the school. So I'm very aware that I'm trying to speed through, but I am potentially going to run out of time. But the next part of the session, what I actually wanted to do was to give you a little bit of an oversight of some of the CPD that I have run previously in schools, and this is a very condensed version. But first of all, we'll talk just now about why CPD is important to engage the hearts and minds of staff. I think it is really, really helpful for everyone at the school to understand what careers is, why it's important, why it's part of education, and then feel just much more confident about talking about it. And so I would suggest that compulsory rather than optional CPD to engage staff with careers is really crucial. I would suggest that this is delivered by careers professionals, so that could be an advisor or careers advisor who works at the school, if they're willing to offer it, if they're willing to allocate some of their time to do it. It might be something you as the careers coordinator or careers leader lead out on, but the advisor perhaps is present and you talk with the advisor about what good careers looks like, or an external organisation, and it's something that we've run complete careers in the past, but there are other organisations or other individuals who may be willing to do it for you. Because what you want is somebody who is passionate about careers, standing in front of your staff and talking about it. Your advisor, if they're a confident public speaker, is often a really good person for this, actually. And if you think about your careers advisor, forgive me if I've said this before, as being a really good person to give you an idea of where your learners should be at by the time they leave school. So what does that kind of almost perfect student look like? Obviously, they are self-aware, they are motivated, they're looking at websites themselves, they're making career links, they are optimistic, they've got a plan B, they are listening to their family, but also listening to themselves, and they're aware of their context. So your advisor is a great person to maybe talk to the rest of your staff about, okay, what are we trying to achieve? What is our ultimate goal for these young people? It should be talking to the staff about the importance of careers, and I think we should maybe talk about some basic career theory so they understand what careers is. A bit of training potentially is how to deliver careers. Most staff will not have had any training to deliver careers or wider PSHE, or staff may be asked to deliver information to students on prevent or sexual health. They haven't always had training on what that looks like, and I think that is quite important. And I think the emphasis of the training really can be, or it's helpful if it is on that drawing on their own experience and sharing their own narrative. So what I'm going to do now just quickly is bring up a few slides that I put together for a session that I ran a little while ago, which was on basically getting the whole school behind the careers agenda. And rather than just talk about what that might look like, I actually sort of spent 5 minutes actually talking about how I would run a session on something similar for the wider staff at the school. And this is something that I have run before, and it worked really quite well quite some time ago. And I think it's just about, getting everybody in the room, whole staff, what would you say? Even if it's a Teams chat, even if it's a compulsory presentation that they need to do on Teams or scroll through in their own time. So this is the kind of stuff that I talked about with them, and the narrative in italics underneath is kind of a little bit of narrative from me about why it's useful. So what I would do is perhaps start off with a question like this. So what do you wish you could say to 15-year-old you? Really important. What would you take them back to their own situation at 15, create that empathy. What do they wish someone had said to them and told them? And it gets them thinking about things like influence and value. It might get them to start sharing their ideas, or it could just be quite a private thing. I'd maybe keep this question private, because it is hugely private. And it will also help them to think about how careers is not just about school, but it's about your wider life, your sense of identity. I then get them to share, because this is always something that is quite humorous and is a good icebreaker. What is your first memory of careers in school? And it's going to get them expanding their narrative, talking to the person next to them, and encouraging them to think critically about the experience they had at school. I can tell you as a careers advisor, and those of you who are careers professionals in this session, you're continually being told by people what is good careers and what kind of, right, thank you very much, Natalie's not seeing the right slides. Okay, let's go back. But the slide that I was showing you was basically a question on what are, right, I'm hoping you can see now. What I'm going to do is going to stop there and then reshare, so you're going to see me again in a moment. The slide I was showing you was a slide on what do you think, what careers was like in your school. I think this happened to me before. I need to actually change the presentation. So please give me a thumbs up if you can see the slide which says in black, what do you wish you could say to a 15-year-old? Yay, thank you very much, Natalie. And I'll go forward. So what is your first memory of careers in school? It's the second slide I've put on. Hopefully you can see it now. Thanks very much for highlighting that. That's absolutely brilliant. And getting the staff to think, okay, critically, what did they experience? What happened to them? What was good? What was bad? You know, everybody has got a story to slag off careers advice. So I do worry that in the future that people are going to be saying the same thing about me. Modern careers advice is different. It's more about supporting young people to make decisions for themselves. But I'm sure at some point I will have put my foot in it and said something which is going to be repeated at dinner parties for the next 20 years. Or my careers advisor told me that I should consider investment banking and something like that. It's just it's a hazard. Thankfully, there's no like capacity for learners to kind of what's the word, like litigate against you. But it's a really good one to start talking about. Again, getting them to think very personally about their own experience. Next slide we talk about is we'd have a go at something like a little quiz. If you've got enough time, 16 personalities is the best one, but the little buzz quiz is a great one. A little fun exercise to get the staff themselves thinking about their own profile, their own individuality. And it's a really good idea to talk a little bit about things like career matching now, because actually, you know, I could do a careers quiz with a group of teachers and they'd all come up with very, very separate careers personality types, but clearly they're all in teaching. And so it's just an indication there of the fact that career matching is just one element that you can consider when talking about career planning, because actually every profession requires a lot of different individuals working in it. What I'd go on to talk about now is a little bit of career theory, just to give them a little bit of context, understand what career matching is, understand what a social economic approach is, understand what chaos theory is, understand what planned happenstance, which is probably, for those of you who know a bit of careers theory, the closest to what modern careers thinking is like. And this is not so that they have to remember any of this. I'd reassure them that there's no need for them to remember any of this. It's just the fact that there are different ways of looking at careers, and there's different ways to help young people with their careers. And through history, our perception of what's going on is changing. So career matching is very much those career quizzes that can be done. It's very much the idea that someone sees a young girl playing with a doll and says, oh, she should be a great nursery nurse. We could talk about social economic approach. Again, this is quite a personal approach here. You know, who has influenced you on your career? Who do you want to make proud? And what I'd suggest with all these areas is that they think about how these elements apply to their own career journey. We've got chaos theory there, which is always a lovely one, which is just about a lot of things happen that we don't plan. You know, unplanned family issues, health issues, not quite getting the grades to go to the university you want to go to, meeting somebody in Australia and deciding to move there, all the things that happen that we can't, being made redundant, we can't change, we can't influence. And then lastly, take them on to something like planned happenstance, which is really about how individuals can be supported to make their own decisions and equipped throughout their life. What I then go on to do is have a look at a few quotes. So the one I put here is, my family want me to be the first person to get into university. And in order for them to look at quotes, I want them to be thinking about these individual students and what they should be listening for, what a careers advisor would be listening for, rewording the phrases that they're using, for example. I'd use things like this, quotes: give a man a fish and you feed him when he wants, teach a man to fish and you feed him for the whole of his life. I don't like the fact we've got man there, but this is the real idea behind modern career theory, which many of you will know, is that by helping students just to work out their next best step, that maybe college is best for them and a BTEC in health and social care is the next best step. Okay, that's one thing that we're giving them. But actually the aim of modern careers support is that you are helping students make decisions themselves. You're helping them to research themselves. You're helping them to take into consideration a range of factors that are going to help them throughout their life. So when they're in their 50s and their 60s and they're unhappy and they want to make a change, they feel confident enough to actually make alterations for themselves, because they've been taught, and this is crucial, the right kind of attitude to career management. It's much more about forming the right kind of mentality and attitude than it is about necessarily planning what's coming next. I put another quote here: Miss, I'm worried I don't know what it is I should be. And when I did the training with the staff, I took apart this sentence with them, listening for the emotion in that student's words, rewording it. Clearly, the student is worrying that by not knowing what career they're going to do, or different careers they might inhabit, their whole sense of identity, that word be there, is tied up. So it's about helping that young person to reword and rephrase. And then the next one: sir, I don't think there's any point thinking about jobs in the future, as there'll be hardly any jobs after COVID. These different statements that young people are making. I talk then about something like the value of listening and the importance of listening well, and the problem with fake news, and really suggesting them there that bad careers advice seems to go a long way. It really does seem to stick. So I really would encourage teachers and all staff at school to be very wary of saying things like, I've heard people report that don't do drama A-level, it's a rubbish A-level, do maths. Things like that, really unhelpful statements. The best A-level to take is, in my view, the A-level you're going to do best in and you're going to enjoy the most. And so it's about really highlighting that can be a bit of an issue. And I take quotes. I've got here Lincoln Minster and King's School, Grantham, 2 schools I've been involved with. Talk to the staff at the school about what is actually in the careers policy, or what is in the whole school policy in terms of careers. Highlight what actually the school should be doing. And then I'd follow on to talk about some ideas, some ways in which they can be thinking about putting careers across the curriculum. But as you'll see, that is not by any means my main focus in terms of a session that I would run like that initially for teachers. I would not be focusing initially on a huge long list of different things that they could potentially be doing in terms of careers across the curriculum. I'd be much more focusing on that sort of understanding of why it has value, that boosting of confidence for them to talk about it, before basically inundating them with a list of ideas, which, as anybody knows who attends any careers leader training or conference, can feel just incredibly overwhelming. You're being given a huge long list of best practice, and actually the problem is you're thinking, how on earth am I going to be able to do any of that? And I think really that's not necessarily where the main emphasis needs to lie initially when we're trying to talk to academic staff. So that was the presentation I did, and at the end I talked a little bit about its impact. I wanted to talk to you about its impact and I didn't, so I'll talk about it now. What is the likely impact of running a session like that for all staff? Well, it's hopefully getting them thinking, actually, do you know what, I can talk about careers because I've had a career and I've been 15 before, and I had some good career support and some bad career support, and I'm just aware of the different factors that are impacting on young people. And I'm coming into contact with young people all the time. I'm having regularly 1 to 30 conversations with learners, and I'm quite often having one-on-one conversations at the end of a lesson during tutor time with my sixth formers. And so I am uniquely placed to have some really good conversations with these young people about what it is they want. So the idea is that it's all a little bit happy-clappy and inspirational and kind of positive, and that it's kept very light, because like I say, coming up with a huge long list of ideas is not necessarily always appropriate. And it's really crucial that it's getting the staff to think with quite a critical mindset just like we critically kind of analysed the purpose of education at the beginning of this session, really engaging with a critical mindset what careers is. You know, don't be frightened to criticise the outcome of your careers quiz. Don't be frightened to criticise, things that people might be saying to you. Don't be frightened to analyse what your parents are saying to you or what their parents are saying to them. And so that real critical engagement is, in my view, a real useful step to confidence in terms of developing that. Now, having said all that I've said about not giving a huge long list to staff of different things that they could be doing in terms of careers, I am actually ending this presentation, and we are pretty much at the end now, with some things that I've seen that work well in some schools. I've tried to touch on quite a few as I've gone through this presentation, but I'm now going to give you a large, long list. Overwhelm you, I'm afraid, with some of the things that can work well and do work well. Now, I'm not saying that all of these have to be delivered. I've never seen a school that delivers more than a third of these at once, but this is some of the stuff that you can be doing. I'm aware it's 4 minutes to past, so I'm going to rattle through these and then I've finished. So one thing that works very well is having departmental reps, obviously ideally within time allocation and pay allocation, but I've seen this happen at a number of schools. The history department has a member of staff, as does every department in school, who has a small responsibility for careers, and ideally a bit of time and money allocated to that, where they can be going through, for example, the schemes of work, highlighting careers links, organising employer talks, and we'll talk more about that. Organising employer talks by department, I talked about that, that works really well. Asking or requesting or ensuring that departments have a responsibility to develop, say, or to organise, say, two different departmental employer talks a day. Things like careers notice boards in every department, which showcase careers links and alumni. Having skills-based posters in every classroom. So these might be generated from centrally from the careers department, but they're displayed in every classroom so that the teachers can reference them. And it's going to hopefully improve skill vocabulary for staff and learners. You could ask departments or tell departments to run subject careers assemblies or drop-down sessions. If you've got a drop-down afternoon, can the geography department run a 20-minute session with learners on careers in geography? Can geography once a year or once every 2 years deliver an assembly on careers in geography? Can they deliver a newsletter on careers in geography? Having staff feed into careers assemblies, newsletters. I've asked staff before to tell learners or to tell me, and then I tell learners what personality types they got when they did careers quizzes, what jobs did they get told to do when they were younger, what work experience did they go on when they were younger, that kind of thing. It's kind of funny. Kids like to hear what their teachers were given as their profile and where they went on work experience. Departments using their contacts for employer sessions. So within the departments, staff may have, contemporaries they went to university with, for example, friends who work within relevant employer fields, having the department involved in mock interview days, having option booklets at Key Stage 3 and 4 that link to careers to the curriculum. So could the geography department, could the drama department write a small paragraph on the different careers that they could link to with doing drama A-level, for example. Explicit links being made in subject lessons. This is, like I said earlier, that's done at Cherry Willingham School, where little icons are actually put in each lesson so that it's referenced. STEM events that are going on. Science department particularly good at this, often having an awareness of local STEM events and getting learners there. Making sure that trips make explicit links to careers. Every time an academic department goes on a trip, they're entering a workplace, whether that's a national park or a theatre, and just simply on the coach or as they get off or when they're sat down for a minute, just making the students aware that they're in a workplace and what kind of people work in this organisation. Now, this is done very infrequently, but it's brilliant when it is done. Schemes of work which reference careers links, so schemes of work which particularly actually make a little careers link. With perfection, it would be actually linking to something like the CDI framework, but that's probably a step too far. One school I saw, again, a challenging school, had a reward system entirely based on employability skills. They'd gone to local employers and talked about what they needed, and their whole prefect system, their whole house system and all their points were based on those employability skills. And then subjects of pastoral contacts being encouraged to refer for guidance, and careers content, and this is crucial, and my last point, being communicated to the careers leader. So it's very much a two-way process. You're inspiring the departments to hopefully do more careers, get more stuff out there to learners, but also it's really key that they identify what they're doing already and pass it back to you so that you can successfully audit it, so you know what's going on. Very often, when it comes to Gatsby 4, much more is being done than we realise, and what it's a case of doing is, okay, auditing it, itemising it, and helping those academic staff to make those links. Now, I was worried about going under time and I've gone 1 minute over. I do apologise to you all. Please do feel free to get off now. I hopefully that has been useful for you. Hang around if you've got any questions, put the questions in chat, or do feel free to just email me. It's a big one, it's a big area. What I would say to you, as I say, is work hard on this one area and get it right, and your whole job may become an awful lot easier, and you'll be embedding something within the culture of your school, which will hopefully have really strong longevity and have the biggest impact of any of those benchmarks, in my opinion. Okay, thanks ever so much. This is the last session actually, so I won't be seeing you again, but thanks a lot for coming along. Any questions about anything, please just email me. Okay, John has asked me for my email address and I'll just get it up on the screen now, John. Hopefully you'll be able to see it. Don't know why it's not gone to. There we go. It's jenny.longstaff@completecareers.com. And these slides I'm circulating to Alex, who I believe will be circulating to the wider group, so you can get them again. I won't be circulating necessarily, it's worth saying, John, those slides that I showed you earlier, that's an example of CPD that you could run, but I'm not precious about them or possessive of them. So if you want them, just email me separately and I will, you know, send you my ideas of what I would run if I were you. Or if you do want to consider using Complete Careers or an organisation like us, then think about it. Brilliant, got it. Thanks a lot. Take care, everybody. Enjoy half term.